But first, in Australia at the moment is the radical and controversial British MP George Galloway, a fierce critic of both the former Egyptian dictator Hosni Mubarak and his democratically elected successor Mohamed Morsi. George Galloway is known more famously for his fierce criticism of the US, of Israel and of his own country's foreign policy. In fact, he was expelled from the British Labour Party for that, but twice returned to the House of Commons with upset victories with his small socialist party called Respect. George Galloway twice met with Saddam Hussein. He's spoken with Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. He's been deported from Egypt by Hosni Mubarak and is currently a Press TV reporter for Iran. He spoke yesterday with James Carlton, and this interview was recorded before the Egyptian army military intervention.
Instability is inherent in any revolution. Revolution is a process, not an event. The French Revolution took more than 10 years. The Bolshevik Revolution, more than 6 years. And these Arab revolutions at most are 2 years old. And so it's oftentimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And that's where Egypt seems to be today. The long dictatorship from which I was deported and declared persona non grata of Hosni Mubarak is gone, but the new dispensation has been born but not grown up yet. One thing is for sure, President Morsi has only himself to blame. He had it all in his hands and he blew it. The Muslim Brotherhood failed to share power, and predictably it has utterly failed. Millions of people more than demanded the removal of Mubarak on the streets, demanding that the president should go just 12 months after a very convincing presidential election victory by him. It's sad, but I think it's sadly inevitable. And it's inherent in the Muslim Brotherhood's view of the world, not just in Egypt, but in Turkey, for example, where Prime Minister Erdogan is facing rather similar challenges.
Do you see no role for organised Sunni Islam within a democratic plural context then?
That's why I'm sad, because I do. Political Islam is an entirely legitimate political strand. It doesn't have to be like the Taliban, like Al-Qaeda. It can be successful, as for a long time Erdogan's government in Turkey was successful. President Morsi, I'm afraid, never got past first base.
Let's take us to Syria, where there aren't any bases, in a sense. The long intergenerational dictatorship of the Assads. How do you characterize the situation in that country?
The truth is, no one can win the war. The regime cannot prevail over the opposition, and the opposition cannot bring down the regime. And in any stalemate, the only option is to go to the table. But one of the reasons why the opposition has not been able to overcome the Syrian regime is because they have managed to terrify every religious minority and every ethnic minority in Syria, thus consolidating all of them behind President Bashar al-Assad.
Well, let me put it to you that only began when the conflict metastasized. What it began as was a pro-democracy, pro-Christian, pro-minority, pro-Muslim, pluralist call for peaceful demonstration, and it was Assad whose response was to torture and send in the snipers.
Well, that's true up to a point. I don't know the extent to which Christians were ever involved, but most of what you said there, I agree with. That said, the militarization of the Syrian uprising was, it's now clear, a plan of many for a very long time. The Muslim Brotherhood uprising in Syria as long ago as 1982 was drowned in blood, and they've been nursing their wrath ever since.
Drowned by the father of the present dictator, Hafez al-Assad, who destroyed every single rebel and another 20,000 civilians in Hama to add good measure.
Indeed, and was warmly applauded for doing so privately, if not publicly, by most Western governments who did not want to see the Muslim Brotherhood come to power in Syria. And be careful what you wish for, because what lies behind, if you don't mind my saying so, some of your questions, is a wish that this trend should succeed. But you see in Egypt where that trend can lead. Me, on the other hand, I was with the uprising in Hama in 1982 because I believe that the Muslims have to have the government they themselves choose, not one that's imposed upon them by others. But most Western governments supported the late Hafez al-Assad's crushing of that uprising. It had profound consequences. All I'm saying is that the idea that all of this came out of the ether because of the current Syrian regime's response to democratic protests is wrong. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the International Muslim Brotherhood had long planned an uprising in Syria, and they got one. And look at the result. It ends in the cutting open of people's chests and the eating of their hearts, all the while chanting the name of God into the nearest video camera to put it up on YouTube in the belief, apparently, that people will find this appealing. But they don't. And most Syrians are terrified by it, which is why they've clung to the jacket of President Assad, and that's why he's prevailing, I think.
Of course, we can't say they've clung to the jacket of Assad by any precise measure because he doesn't allow free or fair elections.
No, although he has been advocating them. I personally asked Bashar al-Assad the day after the fall of the Tunisian dictator Ben Ali to call a presidential election right there and then. I like to think he was interested in doing that, but other elements of the regime probably precluded that. But I've got a surprise piece of news for you. If there was an election tomorrow for president of Syria, I believe that Bashar al-Assad would still win it, despite 100,000 deaths, despite million plus refugees. And that would be a testament not so much to whatever qualities he has, but to how terrified people are of what seems to be the alternative.
And the terror goes, you must concede, in both directions. It's not as if only minorities, Alawi, Christians, Druze, Kurds, fear annihilation. The people of Homs, Dera and elsewhere are experiencing annihilation, and they fear should the revolution fail or surrender, it will only get worse.
Most of the dying for the last 7 months at least has been on the government side, but it's true. There are horrific episodes of violence almost beyond our imagination. But of course, a representative government will be the key, and it's up to the Americans to persuade their clients, the Syrian opposition, to come to the negotiating table.
But how can you suggest that America is the barrier to representative democracy in Syria, not Bashar al-Assad?
Because Bashar is there in Geneva and has been since Kofi Annan proposed democratic transition. It's the opposition that hasn't turned up. You know this very well. The opposition cannot even agree on a line to be taken towards the negotiation in Geneva. Now, the United States and its clients in the Persian Gulf are the key to this. A regime that is broadly representative of the Syrian people can be constructed.
And does that require both intervening, collection of foreign powers withdraw, not just the Gulf states, but also Hezbollah and Iran, and with the diplomatic cover from Moscow?
Well, Hezbollah were, of course, the very last foreign force to enter the war in Syria. When often listening to mainstream media imagines that they were the first, they were the last to join.
And they would do well to be the first to leave, wouldn't they?
Well, I think that the Lebanese and Iranian presence in Syria is, of course, a reflection of the sectarian divisions that have increasingly become dominant in this conflict. It goes without saying that as the sectarianization of politics in Syria recedes, so will the presence of their neighbors and their co-Islamists.
But isn't the order the wrong way round? Foreign powers get out first, then?
Oh, great. If you could agree with me right now that every foreigner will withdraw from Syria, no one will be more delighted than me. The problem is that people like you, if you don't mind me saying, have a very selective view of which foreigners you want to withdraw.
No. I'm talking about the jihadis, the Chechens, the Saudis, the Qataris, let's all agree. And the Iranians.
Well, then let's all agree. Frankly, nobody would be happier than the Hezbollah. They don't want to send their soldiers to die in Syria. Their people have been taken from the front with Israel. But of course, you and I both know that the Chechens and the Libyans and hundreds of Australians, who have gone as foreign fighters to Syria, cannot be withdrawn by you or me, or by my government or your government, because they're there determined upon martyrdom or victory. And that's the problem. These people will have to be somehow withdrawn from this battlefield before others can credibly be asked to do so.
And on RN Breakfast, we're with the radical British MP, George Galloway, in Australia for a short speaking visit. Let me ask you about your work as a presenter with Press TV, the broadcaster of the Iranian government.
Actually, I have three television shows. One is with RT, Russia Today. A second with Al Mayadeen Television, which is a Beirut-based Arabic television station. And a third with Press TV. And if ABC want to hire me tomorrow, I'm available.
I'm afraid that's above my pay scale.
I'll appear on any television station that will not interfere with what I have to say.
To say that you'll appear with anyone so long as they don't tell you what to say, yeah, means that you will appear, logically speaking, with some terrible people.
Yeah, people like Sky News, BBC, ABC. Some of them are truly terrible. I've even been many times on Fox News, and you don't get much more terrible than that.
Do you have reservations about the reportage of Press TV?
None whatsoever, any more than I had any reservations about talking to ABC, which has a take on things with which I profoundly disagree.
You accept an invitation to be interviewed by the ABC.
Yeah?
You are employed as a presenter from Iran. There's
an
important distinction.
Yes, but it's an important caveat, this, because what I say on Press TV is what I say on ABC and is what I've always said. And I think that's the test, not who owns... Look, Rupert Murdoch is the most venal press baron of them all. But if he gave me a programme on Sky News tomorrow, I'd take it, because I know that I would speak my truth on Sky News as I speak it everywhere else.
So that means you have reservations about what would also be on Fox. You just seek to counter it with your own consistent views. Like, for example, Press TV, as I say, the government-owned station in Iran that reports...
But you're a government-owned station. Why do you say that with such a high nose? Why do you say that as if being government-owned is somehow beyond the pale? You're government-owned. The government's paying your salary.
Okay, so you're seriously likening the Australian Broadcasting Corporation with its independent board and charter with Press
Please
TV...
don't make me laugh. Independent board and charter. You toe the line of the Australian state. Press TV toes the line of the Iranian state. Don't pretend that you've got a fur coat on, because I can see your drawers. The fact is, government-owned media stations are government-owned media stations. Criticise what they've said, and you're about to, that's fine. But don't criticise them because they're government-owned when you've got a government paycheck in your wallet. I don't share that interpretation.
Well, that's simply based on my following Press TV and their reportage.
Yes, go on.
Take, for example, when they legalised gay marriage in Minnesota. That took place, quote, because the state is known to be under the major influence of Zionist Jewish homosexual figures.
Oh, I didn't see that reportage. And,
I'm happy to give you the copy.
Neither have I ever had it quoted at me. I'm in favour of gay marriage. I have never said a word against Jews. I'm answerable for what I say. If I worked for Fox News, I wouldn't be responsible for Bill O'Reilly.
You've not met me today, but yet you're certain I'm a mouthpiece for a government.
I didn't say you were a mouthpiece. I said that you have a government paycheck in your pocket like a Press TV employee has a government paycheck in his. It's hardly fair to throw it at me.
I wasn't so much throwing it at you as seeking to learn the degree to which your views coincided with your government employer. And I'm glad we got there, notwithstanding the temperature.
Yeah, well, sometimes with heat comes light.
George Galloway, thank you very much for being with us.
Excellent. You're welcome.
George Galloway there, and I guess government-owned is not government-controlled, and that's a significant difference. Well, there may be heat and light at Sydney Town Hall tonight when George Galloway gives a lecture with an extended question and answer session to follow, so get along if you want to be a part of that. James Carlton speaking with the UK Respect Party MP for Bradford West. And George Galloway was once Spectator magazine's Debater of the Year, so how James handled himself pretty well.